Welcome back to the Boot Tragedies. Before we jump into this video, I do want to say some things. A lot of people did hit me up after I posted that community post. Trust me, I'm trying to get back to everyone. It was a lot of people. So if you hit me up and I haven't responded, just be on the lookout for that. Also, hey man, if you want to help with the Instagram or Twitter, DM me on any of those platforms, Discord, whatever, and I'll get back to you. But let's jump into these tight ends, man. Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Taysom Hill. That's going to be the main, three guys I'll talk about today in this video. But before we do that, we'll jump into last year and just some of the numbers that these guys had. Starting off with Juwan Johnson, he had 42 catches, 508 yards, and 7 touchdowns last year. Had a really, really good season for the Saints. That was a big re-signing for the Saints, not letting him go, man. That was a very, very solid production from him in that starting tight end role last season. Then you had Taysom Hill, who had 9 catches, 77 yards. 2 touchdowns, didn't really get to play that tight end role as much. It was a big threat in the run game last season, and I expect more of the kind of same. Then you had Adam Troutman, who also played tight end for us last year. 18 catches, 207 yards, and 1 touchdown on that front. So the tight end, in totality, we didn't really have a great, tight end group. Juwan Johnson, like I said, had a pretty good season. Would disappear from time to time. Not saying it was his fault. Maybe he just wasn't getting them involved. But when he was out there, man, he was making plays for the Saints and was a bright spot for us last season. But obviously this year, we came in and added Foster Moreau. In his season last year, he had 33 catches, 420 yards, and 2 touchdowns as a starting tight end for the Raiders, just because Darren Waller was basically hurt the entire last 2 seasons. And now you're adding basically 2 guys who are probably middle-tier tight ends in Moreau and Juwan Johnson. And they might be playing a 1A, 1B role. Juwan Johnson may be the starter and Moreau may be the backup. I don't know, how the Saints are going to use them 2 tight end sets or what. But those are going to be the guys. Then you have Taysom Hill, who I think is going to be in an even more reduced role at tight end this season. I think he's going to be a lot of just, that Taysom package at quarterback. Of course, he'll probably still catch some passes here or there, maybe 1 a game, if that, max. But I do think Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau will have the bulk of the tight end snaps this year, the bulk of the tight end targets. And for this prediction, it's going to be a little different. I'll just get Taysom out the way right now. I think he's going to have about 10 catches this season. Only about 10 catches, maybe for like 60, 70 yards. Kind of close to what he had last year. I don't think he's going to play, tight end as much as he did last season, just because we don't have the need for him. We have 2 pretty good guys, out there now. If injury happens or something like that, obviously these numbers can jump up and down. When I do these numbers, I'm just going to go off the assumption that everybody's going to be healthy for 17 games, which we know is not the case. But that's what these numbers are going to be based off. Now, the caveat that I do have in this is the Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau. I have no idea how the Saints are going to use them. I don't know if Juwan Johnson is going to be the number 1 tight end and Moreau's just going to be the backup. Or if Moreau's going to be number 1 tight end and Juwan Johnson is going to be the backup. Or are they going to just split, snaps and go basically 50%, split targets. I just don't know how the Saints are going to use these guys, which is good, man. Which is good because that gives Pete Carmichael some, things to do. Maybe, one game is 70% Moreau because they like the matchup. Maybe it's 1 game is 70% Juwan Johnson because they like that matchup. You just have options. So the caveat is I will be giving stats for if Juwan Johnson's the starter and if Foster Moreau's the starter. And then I will be giving stats for if they're going to split time, just equally. But first, a little background. I was doing some research, on numbers from the tight ends over the Saints last couple seasons. And the tight end group has been, oh my God, it's been bad. It's been really, really bad. The best year, not the best year, but I went back to 2019. That was a really good year for the Saints tight ends. Over 1,000 yards as a unit right there, leading the way, which is a guy I won't mention. I'll just call him number 87. He had a pretty good season for the Saints. They went over 1,000 yards. Obviously, John Payton, Drew Brees were there as well. This year, I don't think we'll get 1,000 yards as well, just because I think the receiver's going to have such a good year. Alvin Kamara's going to have such a good year, but I do think the tight ends will help. I don't think the numbers will be, crazy out the world numbers from the tight ends, but I do think they'll be really, really good to help the Saints. I think they'll finish around 800 total yards, something like that, 900 total yards. Maybe get over 1,000 yards. That's definitely possible if some things go their way, but it doesn't seem likely with all the weapons. And if I'm assuming Michael Thomas is going to be healthy, Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, it's just going to be a lot of weapons out there on the field for the Saints. Everybody can't eat. Now, if everybody does eat, hey, the more the merrier, but it's just going to be somebody's going to have to take a hit stat-wise. That doesn't mean they're not playing well, doesn't mean they're not producing for the team. It just means everybody can't get 1,000 yards, everybody can't get 10 touchdowns. So the first thing I'm going to do is start off, let's just pretend they're both equal. They're both going to play the same amount of snaps, get the same amount of targets and things like that. So if they're both, even number of snaps and things, I have Juwan Johnson finish with around 31 catches, 415 yards, 4 touchdowns, and Moreau finished it with about 26 catches, 360 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That puts the total, for the Saints tight ends at close to 800 yards. Then if you add Taysom in there, they're getting close to 900 yards. I think that's a really, really good output from the Saints tight end group if they can get to around 900 yards. I already predicted that the top 3 receivers are going to have around, under 3,000 yards, maybe right at 3,000 yards for the top 3 receivers. You get the tight ends almost 3,000 yards. You're already putting your quarterback at 4,000 yards without even adding like the running back, some fullbacks, some miscellaneous things like that. So, everybody can't get 1,000 yards. So you might think these numbers are low, at first glance, at first look, but in reality, I think these would be really, really good numbers for the Saints tight ends. Now, I'll talk about if, the guys had flipped, roles, if Moreau was starting or vice versa. Now, I think if Moreau started the entire year and Juwan Johnson played the backup role to him, Moreau would probably finish with about 35 catches, 490 yards, 5 touchdowns, where Juwan Johnson would finish with about 19 catches, 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think that'll be a solid output from them as well. I don't think it'll go like that. I think this is the least, this is probably a 5 or 10% chance of happening if that was the case. I think the most realistic scenario will be both of them splitting, time is basically 1A, 1B. And when the second option would be Juwan Johnson starting and Foster Moreau playing backup role. And that third option, like I just said, would be Moreau starting and Juwan Johnson playing a backup role. Now, for the final one, if Juwan Johnson started, Moreau backed him up, I think Juwan Johnson would finish with about 43 catches. He had 42 last season, so maybe a catch up. 550 yards, which would be much more yardage than he had last year, and about 6 touchdowns. I think that'll be a really, really good season. I think I'll put his touchdowns a little bit lower just because we'll have more red zone threats. I think Olave will be better. You got Jamal Williams, you got Taysom Hill, you got Michael Thomas being back. Like I said, everybody can't eat. Hopefully everybody does, but it's just going to be very unrealistic. And I think if Johnson started there, Moreau will have about 14 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown in the backup role. I don't think, that'll be the case. Like I said, I think there'll be 1A and 1B. But, man, the tight end group did get better. We did get better. Now, hopefully that, on the paper we got better. That hopefully that can translate to on the field. And I'm excited, man. I'm super excited. I can't wait for training camp to get going because this is a dead period right now, and it's awful. It's awful. That's it for the offense, though, man. That's it for the offense. I'll probably, get some defensive things going. It's really hard to predict, like tackles and things like that. So I might just sum the defense up in whole. Defensive line, you can predict sacks and tackles for loss. Linebackers is kind of easy to predict some tackles and things like that. But for corners, I can't predict Lattimore to have 8 interceptions when they don't even throw the ball his way and things like that. So I'll kind of do them, the defense as one big group, and then we'll see. But thank y'all for tuning in once again, man. As always, this is the Boo Tragedies, and I'm out.